In the many changes in the 1.67 and 1.67.1 JJS updates, they did a lot of interesting things to Charles. The first change gave him an earth-shattering nerf, which made Shut Up a move you can evasive out of. And the second gave him counter buffs that turned eye-catching into a budget Manji kick, made aerial Shut Up sort of work like a counter, and made clairvoyance work on blocking players. While the aerial Shut Up nerf is practically useless, and the clairvoyance buffs are relatively minor, the eye-catching buff that makes it capable of countering projectiles is great in that it gives Charles actual options to deal with zoners like Megamaru, enough to sort of make up for the nerf to Shut Up. Still, Charles is in a very rocky spot as a character, especially when you compare him to other glass cannons out there. And let's talk about why. The biggest problem with Charles compared to Yuji and Megumi is that the survivability buff, aka what he gets to help him not take damage and justify him having 15 less HP than everyone else, isn't nearly as versatile or as good as Yuji and Megumi's. What Yuji gets from the trade-off is feinting, most notably the Crushing Blow and Curse Strike's aerial feints, and sort of Manji Kick, but that's more its own thing. Megumi, on the other hand, gets Divine Dogs, which were thankfully brought back from the grave by the 1.67.1 patch after being killed in the initial balance changes of Doom. Both of the things that Yuji and Megumi get make it a lot harder for them to be hit. Yuji's gives him insane mobility. Crushing Blow aerial can dodge a lot of attacks and make distance, while Crush Strike's aerial feinting can sort of make you invincible for a really short period of time by bringing you into the air. Again, being good for dodging a lot of attacks. Megumi's Divine Dogs, on the other hand, let him interrupt enemy abilities with just the press of a button, turn moves that would normally be unsafe into safe ones by having the dog attack while he's doing something, and just provide passive pressure because the opponent has to look out for the dog at all times. Charles, on the other hand, gets eye-catching, and technically is our special. Let's talk about all of those, starting with eye-catching. Eye-catching is a counter with the exact same animation as your block that acts near identically to Manji Kick, with the upside being that the cooldown refreshes when landed, and the downside being that, unlike Manji Kick, it has a much shorter Ragdoll duration, which makes it impossible to follow up on with anything meaningful, though Sacrilege will usually land for some cheeky extra damage. If whiffed, it has one of the longest end lags in the game that practically guarantees the opponent can punish you. The biggest thing this move has, and by extension Charles, is the ability to shut down moves which are super telegraphed, but also really hard to avoid normally. There are very few of them in the game, to be fair, and those that do exist usually rely on people confirming into them, in which case Charles can't do anything, but there are examples. Naoya's Decisive Strikes is super telegraphed, and will always hit the target once it's cast, unless they get interrupt or blocked. The user can't fade out of it, like Yuji, and are forced to commit. So, Charles gets two things in these kind of matchups. One, he doesn't have to play Naoya's mind game, and can shut down Decisive Strikes 100% of the time by just pressing his 3 key. And two, the moment he gets ult and puts Clairvoyance on someone, the Naoya player quite literally cannot use Decisive Strikes unless they want to get hit by the... Of course, other moves like this that aren't used solely for combos do exist. Mahito's annoying Club Dash gets hard countered by it, though that doesn't negate all the other options Mahito has. And Toto's, who whiff the first hit of Swift Kicks to abuse the unblockable dash, also sort of get shut down. On the flip side, Yuji negates this entire gimmick because all his buttons are extremely fast, and he doesn't have to commit to anything, since he's able to feint every single one of his options. This doesn't make it an unwinnable matchup in the sense that if your opponent is a bad Yuji, and you're a good Charles, you'll still probably be able to win by out M1 trading them and just landing way more combos. But if both players are of similar skill levels, then the Yuji is winning 100% of the time, as long as that Yuji is actually using their kit well to make it difficult to predict their attacks. Eye-catching really isn't as great as it's made out to be, mainly because you only want to use it in situations where you'll know it'll land, practically as a get-out-of-jail-free card, because using it purely off predictions has the risk of giving your opponent a free combo in neutral, when you could have just taken the safer route of M1 trading normally. Eye-catching also gets you practically nothing off landing it as well, unlike Manji Kick, which can easily lead into Curse Strike's aerial or Crushing Blow. So weighing the scales, using it off pure prediction can get you about 7.5 damage, or it'll make you take over 50 damage, if not just kill you because Megumi players do exist. It's a purely defensive tool with no offensive capabilities, And furthermore, unlike Crushing Blow feints or Divine Dog, which can't really hurt you at all for misusing them, screwing up in eye-catching hurts a lot. Really though, that's not the main reason Charles' defensive options are horrifically weak, compared to Yuji and Megumi. It's weak because it's nothing but defensive. Yuji's feints are also incredibly strong offensively, since the Crushing Blow feint acts as a second dash that gives him insane rushdowning, screws the opponent's head, and he also gets a passive that gives him faster M1s, on top of a moveset with short cooldowns that give him consistently good damage. Megumi's Divine Dogs can combo into things like Toad to help him combo starts, they're using the Downstem of Doom combo to deal a ton of extra damage, and the passive pressure from them being on the field also lets him play much more offensively without having to worry too much, which does help his offense a lot. If you're up against Charles though, there really isn't any passive pressure until he gets his ultimate, because if you get hit by eye-catching, who cares? You took 7.5 damage, boo-hoo. Either bait it out, or just play as you normally do against Charles, because if they spam counter too recklessly and you notice, then you bait, get yourself a free combo for way more than 7.5 damage. To be fair though, Charles does sort of have a second defensive option. It's a huge stretch, but his R special kinda works defensively because forcing your opponent to dash in a certain direction can mess with them a little. Realistically though, the long cooldown between forced dashes, and the fact that it just forces your opponent to dash in one direction, makes it a purely offensive tool. It's not terrible, using it on bad players who don't understand the counterplay can easily net you a combo by forward dashing into the spot they're forced to dash towards, while using it on good players still puts you in a really advantageous position, because they're forced to either use their actual dash to avoid getting forced into the predicted spot, where you can easily side dash M1 them, or try to block your follow-up attack, which can be hard against side dash M1s, or even impossible if you try using something like Sacrilege for some eensy-beensy damage. Still, it doesn't do anything meaningful on the defensive end, and is more so just a very useful neutral tool offensively, but not one that justifies him having less HP like the absurdities that are Yuji's Crushing Blow feints and Megumi's whole entire kits. There is one other weakness to go over before moving on to the biggest one, and it's his ultimate being terrible on a serious level of play. Though honestly, this isn't an issue in terms of him being enjoyable, more so just one of the big things that stops him from being a viable pick for people who only care about ranked elo, which honestly those people are kind of weird. Charles' ultimate is really fun. It's super satisfying to land the ult, it's a one-shot after all, and it has a very well animated cutscene that's basically like injecting dopamine straight into your brain. There's an issue though with the concept of it, and that mainly has to do with it being completely useless against a lot of ultimates in the game, which at best makes it matchup dependent, and at worst makes it a win more button that's useless in an even fight. 1, because it's a counter, 2, because it's a counter that only works on melee attacks. It's not like this is unfair. If you could counter anything in the game, then you could do a lot of dumb stuff, so I'm not really suggesting that it get buffed. But against ults like Gojo, Sukuna, Megumi, pretty much any ult in the game that has range attacks, Charles is helpless. Those types of ults don't engage with melee attacks at all, so Charles' counter is practically useless, and he might as well not have one at all. At the very least, Locust Guy can instant kill an ult if he's able to land an M1 combo against them, but Charles just gets screwed horribly. It gets useful against ults like Akari, Higuruma, and Todo that are melee-oriented, but you do only get one shot, and unlike Locust, there are 0 confirms, so Charles then has a chance to miss his fight back button and lose everything. I do want to reiterate, I don't think this should be changed, because JJS is not a very competitive game, and in a lot of casual settings, nobody cares, because people generally run on a don't use ultimate honor system. But it shouldn't be forgotten when talking about why Charles is weak, because it is one of the core issues, if not one of the biggest ones, that stops him from being viable in ranked. The biggest weakness Charles has though, has to deal with Ragdoll cancel. He has no safe ways to bait it out, since Despair on someone grounded can be Ragdoll cancelled for a free punish, a forward dash out of Shut Up can be evasive and punished, Shut Up aerial can be evasive and punished, and trying to sacrilege someone on the ground can also be evasive and then punished with a forward dash. It makes him extremely unsafe as a character, and since you can react to every single one of these combos Charles has, plus Charles having to commit to all of them, it means that if he goes for any of these combos, the opponent can save their Ragdoll cancel, react to that combo, and then punish Charles for a load of damage. Both Yuji and Megumi's trade-offs for less HP give them insane offensive options that make it difficult to defend against them, while also giving them insane defense because unlike other characters, they're not forced to commit to anything they do. Yuji, through his feints, Megumi through Divine Dogs. Charles, meanwhile, is nearly unsafe on every single action he has, which makes his neutral awfully risky, and as a side effect, makes him very weak against Ragdoll Cancel, also with no way to effectively bait Ragdoll Cancel, unlike Yuji, who again feigns people, or Megumi, who uses Nue, which forces a Ragdoll Cancel, since you can't evasive once you're hit. So, compared to both Yuji and Megumi, Charles is worse in every conceivable way, at least on the literal side. He has worse damage in both of them, Yuji because he doesn't care about evasive, while Charles does, and Megumi because his damage ceiling on people without evasive is insane. He also has worse offensive neutral than Yuji, whose mobility is crazy, and Megumi, who has a bunch of ranged options to lock people down. He has worse defense than Yuji, whose feigning and mobility let him fly out of any bad situation, as well as cancel out of attacks that would get him punished, or Megumi, whose divine dogs let him attack during all his options to make unsafe moves completely risk-free. And his ultimate is an all-or-nothing counter that is just as capable of doing nothing as it is at getting a one-shot, whereas Megumi can just pop ult for a one-shot combo plus Mahoraga, and then Yuji gets Sukuna, who's just a really good ult because of the M1 passive. Even compared to the more normal characters like Todo, his trade-offs more so just make him average when you ignore the 15 less HP debuff, rather than actually good, and when you take the HP debuff into account, he's just underwhelming. The big thing Charles needs on a fundamental level is better ways to bait Ragdoll Cancel, so that he isn't forced to eat a hit every time he actually tries going for a combo that involves Ragdoll, whether that be to spare into Sacrilege, shut up into a forward dash, or an uppercut into anything. That would make him better. It wouldn't make him amazing, but he definitely doesn't need to be. I compare him to Yuji and Megumi because they're both 85 HP characters who Charles can justifiably be measured against, but they're also two of the strongest characters in the entire game, and Charles is definitely not supposed to be underlevel, though he also shouldn't be this far below it. If anything, Charles doesn't deserve to be an 85 HP character. Beyond the Ragdoll Cancel weakness he shares with Gojo, that kills him at higher levels of play, the other parts of his kit are decent, and in some ways on the good end, of 100 HP characters. That's my personal opinion on Charles, though as with any opinion, it's not free of fault, and if you have your own take on him, then go for it in the comments. He's by no means an entirely unviable character. You can see in my background footage that he's an amazing noob stomper, and can sort of, but not really work against good players. But his kit isn't strong enough to warrant less HP, and he has such a glaring weakness in dealing with Ragdoll Cancel. Anyways, that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed watching, make sure to like and subscribe for even more content. I'm Noob Eternally, thanks for watching, have a good day, and